OpenAI, the makers of ChatGPT, launched a ton of new products, and it wasn't ChatGPT. It was everything else. It was everything for developers to build the ecosystem of AI. And I want to get into why we should all care about that. Because the public narrative is really clear. It's, OpenAI is dominating everything, they're building everything, and who else can compete with them? But it's a lot more complicated than that. And I want to get into where you have an opportunity if you're in the AI space building. I want to get into what you should take away if you're in leadership and you're looking at which AI company to go with. And I want to get into what we, the people who are just interested in AI and trying to figure out how to use AI in our careers, should take away from this. The first thing to think about is that this wasn't aimed at all of us. This was aimed at developers. And that gives you a clue as to where AI is today. AI is at the builder's stage today. I keep emphasizing this in my Substack. If you are a builder, this is your year. 2026 is also your year. This is a moment when the applications that will make AI feel real for everybody don't yet fully exist. And I know what you're saying. You're saying, Nate, the irony. We are talking about Dev Day, and look what OpenAI launched. This is the application of the future. I've seen those newspaper articles. Because what they launched is effectively a play on Apple's App Store. So, Apple famously launched a hardware device that became a platform. Then they launched the App Store, and then the App Store became how they monetize. It took a Supreme Court case to change that, actually, funny enough. But OpenAI wants the same play. They want to say we have, as they announced, 800 million weekly active users. We have so many people. We are going to launch an App Store within our platform, and everybody will use it. And so that's what they announced. It's called Apps SDK, App Software Development Kit. Third-party apps can now integrate directly into ChatGPT, Spotify, Calendly, think QuickBooks, think Zoom. All of these apps now can have a home inside ChatGPT. So what does that mean? That means ChatGPT wants to be the computing layer for the future. Their basic thesis, right? The idea is for 70 years or however long we've had computers, we have computed in bits and bytes, and now we compute in tokens. So if we compute in tokens, why don't run all those tokens through OpenAI? I don't think it was a coincidence that they literally gave out highly visible awards to the people who spent the most tokens with them. I saw some of the plaques online, right? 10 billion tokens, a trillion tokens. They put the names up on the stage there with Sam Altman. They want to tell you two things. They want to tell you, one, they have all of the chips to serve those tokens, and two, the future is about computing with tokens and the future is with them. But the thing is, it's not as clear as they made it sound from the stage. I'm going to give you a couple of examples, and I want you to start to wrestle with this. Whatever your role in the AI ecosystem, the questions underneath the PR are what matters the most. So question number one, is the future as drag and drop, as they are suggesting? Is the future as app within an app, as they are suggesting? Those were two of the major plays they made, right? I talked about the apps SDK, this idea that you would operate everything in this little app window inside ChatGPT, or the future is building with agents. I talked about that, where you actually can drag and drop and put agents into a linear flow. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of functionality there. Just like in the iPhone moment, there are going to be builders that turn into millionaires overnight because they take advantage of the App Store moment for ChatGPT, because they take advantage of being able to build agents with ChatGPT when everybody else is still trying to figure it out. So those opportunities are there. But that is different from saying that they have achieved a lock on the market. And I don't think they have. And the reason why is actually pretty simple. Developers like the current world we have, where we have multiple models competing, often viciously, to offer cheaper and cheaper prices for tokens, competing to deliver better and better and better experiences. Cursor, Claude Code, Codex, competing back and forth. It is great for developers. Developers have never been so catered to, right? And if you're getting into building and you are using vibe coding to build, or vibe engineering, as I heard it called, great. You also have never been so catered to. We have billion-dollar startups competing for your attention and for your dollar. In that world, do you really want to lock in with OpenAI? That is the question, and that is why this is not the same as the iPhone moment. Think back to 2007. Oh, I have the gray hairs. I'm thinking back to 2007. iPhone was the first truly interactive multimedia phone that had product market fit. Before that, yes, there were phones with screens. Yes, there were some phones with apps. Yes, there was BlackBerry, but none of them had a intuitive, clean platform that anybody could plug things into and just build. And that is what iPhone did with the App Store. I remember one of the first successful apps was the beer leveler, where you would just tilt your iPhone screen. I swear, this sounds like the dumbest thing now, but like it was all the rage because we didn't know that you had like whatever the accelerometer or whatever that determined the level. And you would just be able to sit there and play with it and watch the simulated sort of pixels dash across the screen as the beer stayed level no matter how you turn the phone. This is what passed for entertainment in 2007. But now we don't have that world anymore. We don't. We have a world where Claude has the MCP server ecosystem and has open sourced that, and everybody loves it, and Google's using it, and OpenAI is also using it. Anthropic is excellent at making Excel, at making PowerPoint. They're going after work primitives. They have Claude Code. Google is out there with really aggressive pricing per token. And so they are going after anyone who cares about sort of price sensitivity for intelligence. And they have an immense hardware stack and very strong expertise to back it up and continue to invest. There's other players too, right? We'll see where Meta goes. We'll see where Grok goes. It is not a world where there is just an iPhone. Imagine a world where there were 5 different iPhones. And that matters because part of what made the App Store successful was that it was the only game in town. That's not true for OpenAI. It is not the only game in town. Now, I will say anyone at OpenAI is going to come back with a very reasonable response. Nobody else has 800 million users. Well, true, but Google has, I don't know, 400 and change with Gemini and growing fast. And Anthropic arguably has the super premium segment that iPhone traditionally represented because people are choosing to lean in and pay for it, which is part of what Anthropic was leaning into in their marketing this week. Put on your thinking caps. They had pop-up cafes in New York and San Francisco. People waited in line. They got a thinking cap. And the clear implication was if you're a thinking person, you're picking Anthropic, right? So I think the book has not yet been written on where all of this is going to end up, but developers and builders have an unprecedented set of choices and are not super excited about a world where they lock in. One of the things that N8N can argue, the agent builder that arguably is most affected by OpenAI's launch of Agent Builder yesterday, or the day before, is that N offers pre-built connectors with a wide range of apps, and it's model agnostic. You can bring in Claude, you can bring in OpenAI, they don't care. Well, OpenAI isn't model agnostic, is it? Right? Like you're bringing in OpenAI's models. That's what they want. That's why they built it. And so I think that the question I have is, in a world that is this multi-model, are we really going to get excited about moving to a platform that is trying to lock us in as builders? Now, let's say you're sitting in C-suite. The question for you is increasingly, do you listen to the developer side of the house and leave room for your technical teams to experiment across a range of models and options? Or do you get into a lock-in relationship with OpenAI because you trust the brand? And I have literally sat and had conversations with leaders wrestling with that. And I think in light of that, it is super interesting to see Azure's strategy with multi-model, because Azure has very deliberately, even though they have an investment in OpenAI, right, a big one, they have decided to lean in on being multi-model. If you want in Azure to get Grok, you can do it. If you want to get Claude, you can do it. If you want to get Gemini, heck, you can do that too. Azure's not going to pick sides. And that's very much Satya's platform play, right? Like Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, he's going to sit there and say, as long as you're getting Azure Cloud, I don't care, right? You can get whatever you want. And that feels much more freeing if you're a developer, because the value is in being able to flexibly choose. Now, I'm going to come back and ask you why, right? Like we have the choice, like we could say that the choice is why, but there's another reason to this. The pace of development in this ecosystem is so fast that it seems irrational to most players to lock themselves in to a single vendor. And that is what OpenAI is inviting. And I think that may generate some brand problems for them because I don't think developers want to be locked in. I don't think vibe coders want to be locked in. And if asked, I doubt consumers do either. I think ChatGPT is winning partly because it is the Kleenex of AI, right? It is a brand name that has become synonymous with generative AI. And that is part of how that long tail of free users is using ChatGPT and not another tool. So another question I want to get to, we've talked through the whole developer builder thing, fine. The other question that I want to get to that is underneath this larger story is a question around liquidity of tokens. So for right now, there are three big games in town if you're developing or building. And OpenAI was out there sort of praising folks that spent a lot of tokens. But what's interesting is there were some people whose names were on that billboard saying, I spent 1 trillion tokens or 100 billion tokens or whatever it is, who were saying publicly on X afterward, I don't want to be on that billboard. I want to spend less tokens. My job is actually to compute less so I am more efficient, so I drive better margins for my business. I don't want to be on the board. Well, that's kind of the difficulty of being in a model maker position, isn't it? You are in a position where you're offering intelligence, but people know it's metered by the token. They know they're charged by the token. They don't want to pay more than they have to pay. And in that world, again, competition is helpful because you compete on price. And this is where I lean really into the Google Gemini side. Google having TPUs in their stack helps them to compete aggressively on price. And when they can compete aggressively on price, they can give everyone else in the business a price floor that they have to be honest about. And so OpenAI cannot charge a premium for their models beyond a certain point because people will just switch down to Gemini. And I think that in that sense, what we're really talking about here is a world where OpenAI wants you to be incentivized to burn tokens. Model makers in general want that. They celebrate that. That was part of Dev Day. They talk about their token burn rate, but any given individual in the game wants to spend less tokens. Every CTO I know, every CIO I know who I've talked to, they don't want to spend more on tokens. They want to spend less. It's like a cloud bill. You want to reduce it. If you want to reduce that bill, you're going to go both with the cheapest token per intelligence available, and you're also going to see if you can compress your calls and do all the other prompt engineering stuff to make it effective, to make it cheap, to make it efficient. And that also undercuts OpenAI's play here, doesn't it? Because they want to sort of send out the message that you're just going to be spending more and more tokens with them because the future of intelligence is compute. But at the same time, like, it's not, right? At the same time, people are desperately and publicly trying to cut how much they're spending. Now, am I here to say that, like, I think that undercuts the demand story for AI? No, because there's so much business demand growing. Like, I don't think that's what's going on. I think it's more about being efficient with your resources and recognizing that a company that's publicly celebrating token burn is a company that may not always have incentives aligned with yours. So there's three scenarios for how this plays out, right? I've talked about some of the hidden stories here off of Dev Day. I've talked about some of what they released. I want to give you three ways this plays out. Scenario one, OpenAI wins and becomes the AWS of AI, right? So developers are effectively going to accept managed orchestration over API access, and they will just work with OpenAI. And this may be because they have a successful CTO play and they just get all these enterprise deals and that's how it works. Or it may be that they just release enough features and they are price competitive enough that they can keep developer loyalty. We'll see. In that world, stuff like the apps SDK just becomes standard infrastructure. Developers find it easy to build with it. They build a lot with it. This in turn reinforces the habit loop with consumers. Consumers start to spend more time there. The attention becomes more valuable. The spend becomes more valuable from consumers. And it becomes this sort of virtuous feedback loop. This is what OpenAI wants, right? That's the future that they're hoping for. OpenAI can then capture platform margins and not just the margins that you get from inference. Because one of the sort of underlying things here is that if you're having to live in a world where models are cheaper and cheaper, you want to not just be living and dying on the cost of inference compute. You want to monetize the platform with unfair economic advantage. And that's exactly the long-term play they're going for. And I'm not that they have the competitive advantage to actually do it. I think it's a bet, and I don't know if it will work. So models are going to commoditize, but OpenAI is basically going to stay a layer above the commoditization of models in that world, right? Like, it doesn't matter ultimately, if you are talking to multiple models, your compute layer, your commodity layer, where the developers are, where the building is, would be OpenAI. So that's scenario one. I don't know that that is particularly likely, given the things I've talked about. Scenario two, fragmentation wins. Developers will resist platform intermediation, so developers will want to go straight to models and compute against them. They'll want their pick of models. Vibe coders and builders will want their pick of options. AI enthusiasts will want to be able to pick Claude as well as OpenAI. And in that world, there will not be as much developer activity. From a consumer perspective, there will not be as many apps in ChatGPT. And OpenAI will remain perhaps the largest player in the game, but they may not achieve what we would call platform economics, where they can charge disproportionate cash for their competitive advantage because it's not that dominant. And so the market looks sort of like the database market in that world. There are many winners. There's not sort of one dominant platform that owns everybody. Scenario three is a little bit more creative. Scenario three is a world where there's some kind of enterprise team up aside from OpenAI that leaves OpenAI with the consumer market, but leaves them out of the very lucrative enterprise and developer market. That could look like a few different ways. It could look like Anthropic and Amazon teaming up. It could look like Google and Amazon teaming up. There are some plays where Apple teams up with Anthropic. If you notice, everybody's trying to team up with Anthropic. That is a theme. So we'll have to see. I think this is the least likely scenario. Like if fragmentation is the most likely, I think this one requires some very complex merger and acquisition and sort of corporate alliances that would have to be delicately negotiated. It would be a world where like you have Anthropic on somebody's cloud along perhaps with Gemini, and enterprises get to choose the best of breed. I think this is the world that Microsoft wants to create. Essentially, an integration world is a world where the platform economics remain with cloud providers, and Azure wants to be in place to pick up those dollars, and so does Google Cloud. And so one of the things that sort of comes to mind for me as I think this through is that, Jassy at Amazon, the CEO of Amazon, was asked why Google Cloud and why Azure are growing faster than AWS right now. And he let slip that he thinks it's because of AI. And of course, Amazon kind of took a bath in the markets as a result. But it's kind of true. Google Cloud and Azure are basically trying to play for this integration play where they can say, pull all the models together. Enterprise can choose best of breed. No one model maker gets to own the relationship directly with the enterprise. The cloud provider owns the relationship with the enterprise. So we will have to see. I think that one's somewhat less likely because I think the power of these model makers continues to grow, shift, evolve as the models become more and more capable. And model makers are becoming savvy enough that they're offering some things directly to enterprises through direct deals. And so it's a complicated relationship. And I think the number of stars that have to align for an integration plays a little bit more. So if I had to be a betting man, right, and I had to handicap this, I would say fragmentation winning, maybe not a coin flip, but close to a coin flip, call it 45%. And AI becoming sort of the AWS and sort of their bet today or yesterday or this week wins. I handicap it 25 to 30%, like I think maybe a third of a chance roughly, maybe slightly less. And then the remainder would go to sort of that integration play, right? Like call it maybe 20% and change. And those are the three scenarios, right? I think that's what we're looking at. If you are, let's do takeaways to close this out, right? If you are a builder, your takeaway is to build aggressively into all of the spaces you can. If you can build with OpenAI's new app store and it takes off, you're in a position to really do well. If you can build with agents, you're in a position to do really well. If you can build with Claude Code and that's cheaper and that's more effective and you can get more done, you're in a position to do well. It's a builder's paradise right now. I will then extend that to anyone who is in sort of the AI enthusiast category who's listening to this. If you're passionate about AI, which I think most of you probably are if you're listening to this, especially if you're listening to the end of this video, which is a long way down, your chance is now to differentiate yourself from the competition. And by the way, your competition is not some hotshot 22-year-old developer in Palo Alto. Your competition are the non-technical folks. And so you may feel like you don't have the technical skills. But your ability to persist through and say, build an agent with Agent Builder in OpenAI, or maybe build it with N8N if you don't want to get locked into OpenAI's standard, that is already worlds better than most folks who are dealing with AI right now. I just did a video on AI fluency. Being able to do that is a whole lot better from where most folks are. So this is also your chance to be a builder. Even if you think you're not as good as the coders, don't worry about it. You are doing great exactly where you are. If you are in C-suite, you should be very carefully thinking about the pros and cons of the model investments you make. You should be, I think, prudently planning for a multi-model world. You should not assume, despite all of the noise of Dev Day, that Dev Day means that you should bet on OpenAI. I think OpenAI is absolutely a player. I would argue it's probably the biggest player at the table. I send people to look at the new Responses API all the time. I think it's great, but I don't think it's the only game in town. And I think that any prudent CTO, any prudent CEO should be leaving options open given the pace of this AI race. So there you go. Most people are talking about Dev Day like it's a tour de force victory for OpenAI. I think there's more to the story, and I hope you got a little bit more of it. If you want to dig in farther, I have a whole lot more in the article. I have a prompt for like reading through it and thinking through it in your way and kind of what you need. Go have fun.